On this episode of Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered, we talk about why there are not more women CEOs in residential real estate. We talk about moonlit dinners, how to recruit and retain your agents on more of a personal level. We talk about acquiring real estate offices, how to make that happen. It's going to be an incredible show. Tune in. You talk about it privately. We talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Dwiggins, along with my co-host, Keith Robinson, a.k.a. Crazy Uncle Keith.
Yes, sir. What's
Keith? I don't know why it gets funny every time I say that.
Because it's true.
So we had Vanessa Bergmark, the CEO of Red Oak Realty, who is one of my favorite people in the industry. She's this incredible leader. Candid, direct, just smart as hell. Tell us, what is she talking about?
Man, she talked about building an independent brokerage and sort of David versus Goliath. She talked about a lot of the things that are running through residential real estate and some of the hurdles. She had some really, really interesting thoughts around the people of operating a business that I thought was brilliant. And then my favorite moment, which I hope everyone enjoys, is we talked about why there aren't more women CEOs in the residential real estate space. She had a very thoughtful and purposeful answer to that.
It's going to be an incredible show. Tune in, everybody.
You're going to dig it.
Vanessa, welcome to the show. We are super excited to have you here. Both Keith and I have known you for a long time. A long time, yes. You are a leader in the industry. You run a very successful real estate brokerage. You have strong opinions about the industry, which I love about you. You're not afraid to share them. Yeah, pretty much. That's true. That's true. So let's just start with tell the listeners just a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are today, running a very, very successful independent company in the Bay Area. And just, so how did you get to where you are today and a little bit about that?
So speed it up because it's 21 years in this industry. So crazy. I am now considered a veteran. I'm like the old guard, all that sad stuff that I was so happy to replace at one point. That's who I am. I started under Keith, and that's why I was invited on the show, because it's clearly about nepotism. And,
for context, she started with me as an agent.
I started as an agent working with Keith.
Yes.
Actually, somebody else hired me, but I worked with him.
True.
I came in as a new manager like 3 months later at Keller Williams in Oakland.
Yep.
It was like one of the original ones in California when they were kind of first breaking out outside of Texas.
I think third or fourth office they opened, I think.
Yeah. So early days. And then when Keith looked at leaving the team leader role and opening up a new market center, he tapped me to replace him. And so I pretty much owe my entire history, my career to Keith Robinson.
You never say that
like
ever.
The first
zero.
3 seconds of your career. But that was a while ago. And B, those were great times. Like those were those early times for you as an agent, for me as a leader. Like those were really formative times, and you've gone on to amazing things since then.
As have you.
Yeah.
Yes, but this is about you. So
So I started with him, and then and I remember, he tasked me to come in and try leadership, and what's interesting is he actually, before he worked at Keller Williams, was working at Red Oak Realty, which is where I ended up ping-ponging went over and became their sales manager of one of their offices, then became their general manager. And then I purchased the company I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years after I went over into management there. And then I've been running it for the last 13.
Which has been awesome because you've done a lot of growth. And we're going to get into this because we want to talk about how you took this smaller independent to being a much larger independent and very significant force in Bay Area real estate. But with all of our guests, we have to start with 3 rapid fire questions.
Yes.
So, because it tells us a little bit about you and lets people kind of see into your psyche. So Keith, kick us off.
Sure. First one, if you were to be a superhero or someone from Game of Thrones, who would it be and why?
Okay, well, the Game of Thrones one is new. I would be Jon Snow.
Yeah, right.
And that's so right, but like I'm going with Jon Snow.
Yeah, for sure.
I won't elaborate on why, but for obvious reasons. Because if I was Jon Snow, I'd be like so cool. And if I was a superhero, I'm going with Aquaman.
Oh,
interesting. No one said that.
No, that's a first.
That's a first.
I watch all your podcast episodes just to see the answer.
That's why listenership has spiked.
Exactly. You got a spike in that. I went with Aquaman because that's like the only that's like really cool to like live under the ocean and like commune through whales and like sharks. Yeah. So I deal with this whole NAR problem just being a shark as Aquaman. Like done tomorrow.
We'll dive into that in a minute. Yeah. Well, I want to go to that comment about NAR as well. So, favorite book or podcast that you're listening to or reading right now?
I don't do podcasts.
Okay. Well, book.
You're on one, so let's like.
Okay, so a book. I read probably a new book a week. I'm a big reader. I don't read a lot of business books. I'm not into them.
That's cool.
But I read a lot of history books. The favorite one that I have this year that I recommend every single person read is a book called King Leopold's Ghost. Has anyone read it? You guys read it? Okay.
No. Does it have pictures?
No. Well, it's got like 10 in the middle. Okay. But it's based on history. It's based on the Belgian occupation of the Congo in the late 1700s throughout the early 1800s. And it really brings a lot of context to, I think, racism in America. It's
interesting
book to read. So that was it. I read that earlier in the spring, and it's probably pitched me on a path of like a good 30 books since. So it was a big eye opener this year.
I love it. That's great. Keith's gonna add to his list. He reads all the books and then gives me the Cliff's Notes version of them. So, Keith, wrap us up. This is one of your favorite ones.
Okay, if you could have lunch with one person, current or historical, like alive or not alive, who would it be and why?
Oh my God. Okay. I still love Winston Churchill, and I think he would be a lot of fun.
It's a great one.
I bet it'd be fun.
A long lunch, it would probably go like into the wee hours of the night. So probably be like an all-nighter. And
you probably would start at 2 and end at 2.
Totally. And I'd have to like wheel him out of there. I think I'd still like Ben Franklin. I know that's kind of like cheesy, but he was so brilliant. Yeah. I mean, although I think he'd be like the kind of guy that kind of made a pass at you at lunch. So I'm
you heard it here first.
I have my suspicions about Ben's behavior.
Just because of the weird glasses or what?
No, it's just the stuff I've learned about him. Like he seems a little bit sleazy. He used to sit in front of his window naked just to think. Like really, like he was an exhibitionist. Let's just call it what it is, right?
And now you all know why we have Vanessa on the pod. Here we go.
I legitimately want to go to lunch with him. So there.
Which one of your 50 books a year did you read about that in?
Oh no, I actually learned that in London when I went to the Ben Franklin's house, and he sat there naked, and like people would be like, and he was kind of like he was a big guy, and he was a little house.
And a little.
Well, the people that are really brilliant tend to be a little eccentric. So it's, I mean. You think of all of them, and they're all a little eccentric.
As I'm fond of saying, brilliance and madness are neighbors, and they borrow each other's stuff.
Fair.
Yeah, those. I think I take the two. I mean, I could double dose them at lunch and do the two of them, and I think
it'd be weird.
Lunch.
All right. Okay, so let's dive into real estate stuff here as well. I think that I want to compliment you because you've done an amazing job of growing your business. And I'm going to ask this question. You're competing with, you're in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country. Dealing with a lot of wealth. You're dealing with really big national brands with big pocketbooks. And you guys have continued to grow and take market share and just, be very impressive. So tell us just like, how are you continuing to grow your business with that much competition in such a competitive market? What are the secrets behind all of that?
Wow. Well, I think this is the thing. We have a really big, and it's a wealthy area, but I think beyond even that, it's a very educated It's a smart area to do business in, right? These clients they're intelligent people, right? And they've got high demands. They're also very logical. Like I find our market a very logical, kind of data-driven, factual, not highly emotional, not lazy market. Not to say that there's these lazy markets, but they like, these are people that do the work and then they expect you to do the work. So as long as you're kind of meeting them there and you hire a type of person that really is okay doing the work, is okay educating themselves. Like one of the biggest things that we still do, and this is pretty astounding when we are recruiting and we're hiring, is that we train our agents every single solitary week. We still have a training on either market conditions or legal or contracts, or, it could be solar, it could be anything, but every week, all of our agents, and we've got about 170 practicing agents or so in our brokerage. I'd say on a training week, there's still 80 or 90 of them coming, and that's every single week. And then we go into our meetings, but there's a type of person that's going to work at this brokerage. And
so
they're going to embrace that, and they're going to be there, and they're going to show up, and they're going to be like, I want to learn more. I want to know I want to be the best in my game, or they're not.
What's your average price home that you guys are selling?
We're about 1.3.
1.3. Okay. Yeah. So,
but we don't consider ourselves luxury, right? Like I will never book myself as like a luxury brokerage.
Right.
So.
Right. And your clientele is Silicon Valley. It's tech people. What is the typical clientele you're working with on average?
So there's a little Silicon Valley in there, right? It's not like Silicon Valley C-suite. It's more, we get a lot of academia, right? We're getting Berkeley. We're getting a lot of employees, right?
University,
government and university. So we're probably leaning a little bit more towards that. But yeah, I mean, they're high tech, high data. Like they're smart. They're engineers. There's a lot of that profile because the market is at such a price point that it distinguishes usually the type of buyer based on their career for affordability factors. So we don't get the full gamut of a market that's just a little bit more reasonably priced, and you get everyone. We kind of center around this sort of type of person that is showing up. Usually two people, like right. So we're not dealing with a huge amount of single people. There's a lot of dual income.
Yeah.
Styles,
And are you? Sorry, go Keith. No,
okay,
please go.
I'll go. You mentioned how you build the office is thoughtful and who will work in your office and or in your marketplace. How do you screen for that? Like, is it, do you have like 3 questions that you ask every person? Like, if you were a superhero, who would you be? Or how do you screen for talent?
I didn't realize that was missing, but moving forward, like clearly.
Drop that in there. Yeah, you learn a lot.
You can just credit us for it too. It's fine.
Yeah.
So.
This is actually the deal-killing question here.
Yeah.
Or not. I think, what we do is we go through all of the questions, just learning about them. And then they go usually through like a round of interviews. We now have somebody that's doing this almost full time. I used to do it. My staff would do it. But you're basically said, like, it's the questions they're asking us. If the first thing that they want to do is say, hey, what's your commission plan? We don't even usually book the meeting. Right.
Oh.
They're coming out and saying,
I love you. Thank you for doing that.
It's not even,
it's the stupidest question to ask when you start a conversation is like, why don't you ask about the value before you talk about the cost? Like,
it's actually a brilliant question. If it's your highest value, thank you for cutting to the chase. I can already tell you it's not a fit. And it's not because I don't want to discuss price. It's just that's your leading question. So we just got to have a little bit of a values alignment. We're a bit of a mismatch.
I love it.
Normally you're somebody that's going to be looking for, like, you want a legal team, right? You want agent support. Like, we have our managers are on every single weekend. Some people are like, I don't ever call my manager. We're like, great. Well, then you're probably, if you're never needing to call, you're either brilliant, you should be running your own thing, or you're probably not calling at times you should, and you're still not taking advantage of something. So they're always, right?
You're 2 weeks away from a lawsuit.
Exactly. So, like, there's no embarrassment in being like, hey, I'm going to touch base on this posse of people that is here to fully support me and my client. I'm going to tap into that all day long and get my money's worth. That's why I'm here. I love those people. When anybody calls and says, I'm sorry I'm bothering you, you're never bothing me. That's what I'm here to do. So you got to get that type of person that's really into that. And then pretty quickly. And you just hire consistently to those things, to the questions they ask, where you're excited and saying, I want you to come here. This is why I want you to come here. And you're really kind of going after them. Even when they're brand new, there's ones that walk in and I'm like, we got to get that one.
Yeah.
I want that one from birth.
So it's part art, part science. It's part art and part science. Interesting. You said you mentioned that you have them go through a series of interviews. Is that all with staff, or are there some experienced agents that you have them talk to who've been around for a while? Or
Yeah. So if now we have somebody who's like literally a black belt in recruiting. So if they get through her, occasionally she'll pop them over to me or one of the other people on the management team. Prior to her, and that's only been 8 months. So I've been doing this 13 years without her. It was a whole process. Now with her, she's like, she can wear so many hats that she hits it all, and she's brought in just some stellar people.
Nice.
So that's where we're having growth, right? We're retaining, which is just as important because that's a core foundation of the culture.
Yeah.
But we're growing, and if I think I had to say like, what is that secret sauce? It's not just that. I'm very clear on what I want for my company. And it is not what I read one day in Inman or one day on HW or like, oh, this is the trend or you got to use AI and all that stuff infiltrates. But I'm very clear on what we're doing and why we're doing it and who our clients are and what we're serving in our community. And I'm unwavering. And because of that, you know what, when you come in, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like it's like, it's not a bait and switch like, oh, I thought I was just going to get really a low commission schedule, or I thought I was going to get just free reign or my own brand or whatever it is. You know what you're going to get. And so a lot of people, if they're really being honest with themselves and they come, they're pretty happy there. So then there's a retention, there's a consistency. I'm not wavering every time somebody puts out an article and says the industry is blowing up. I've heard that since I bought my first house and I wasn't even in the industry.
Right.
Like, so the industry's always blowing up, like no matter. Okay.
Yeah. It seems to be we're pretty fear-based in residential real estate for some reason, right?
And that causes this like wavering in leadership. It causes this like doubt, which trickles down to the staff, which trickles down to the agent, which trickles down to the consumer. And it's a nightmare. So if you're just really feeling like centered and grounded in what you're doing as a business owner, it just clicks.
Yeah. If you know what you are, then you also know what you aren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just screen for what you are, right?
Yeah.
Like it sounds so simple when you say it that way. But you didn't say it exactly like that. That's what I heard you say.
I think what's really interesting is, and it's just coming through with, which is why, you're here, is you're also a very strong leader. And it's one of the things I think people miss. They buy stuff thinking stuff is going to recruit people, and it may add some value, but I tell people all the time, all of that doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, they're choosing the leader in which they want to work for. It starts at the top. All of the other stuff is ancillary. All the products and tech, it's important. But if they don't like the person that they're going to be working for, they're never going to work for you anyway. So I love the fact that you aren't wavering on how you want to operate your business. And I think your comment's valid. It's like some people don't fit. Great. There's lots of other companies to work at. This is what we do. This is what we're about. And you're attracting that talent. I want to piggyback off that. The culture, you're talking about culture and retention. How are you, part of the equation is bringing people in, but how are you making sure they stay and like that they're part of it and that you're continuing to lead them? And I'm assuming just knowing you that you treat them like family. So like how that operates. Like tell us a little about
my family.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I said that. I was like, well, yeah.
Also my kids.
Yeah.
I have a very inclusive approach, and it's really interesting because as I raise my children, my kids are now 14 and 16, and
That's crazy.
babies. Yeah, they're like, I got one more year, and then my kid's going off to college or 2. But in any case, my agents are at my house every month. We do this thing now. I call it the Foolish Moon Dinner, and 6 agents come in every month, and we have dinner, and we always order like next month's Swahili, and the month before something else, and we kind of do it around the full moon because that kind of keeps me like, oh, I've got the moon, I've got dinner. Reminds me that I got to cook for people in a couple of weeks.
That's your CRM system.
By the way, that is the most Vanessa thing I've ever heard. I'm going to use the moon as my reminder for my dinner with my
calendar alert. I can actually be like, oh my God, it's almost a full moon. I've got like 4 nights.
Oh, that's great.
But we do these things, and really, I started doing that this year because it was the offices. No one's really coming back in them anymore, and I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think that's going to be the jam as we move forward. So, how do we transition from a very, collaborative, in your face, kind of everyone together culture into something that's out, but still keep that stickiness? And a lot of it was like we'd hired and gained people, and they didn't know each other over the course of the last 3 years. So it was like, and I pick it out of a bowl. There's nothing's forced, and everyone just kind of shows up, and then we play this game of salad bowl. In any case, it's an amazing bonding experience. And like, that is an example of just how I'm running my company. You're always at my house if you work at my company. Yeah. My staff is here. My kids know them. I still run a large organization. It's complex. It's got some notoriety. It's got a big staff now. But it's really still very hands-on. I want to know my people, and I want my people to know each other, because really what it comes down to is it's not all about the leadership. It's really about what goes in that thread throughout the whole company. If they don't like each other, but they like me, like something happens to me, that whole thing dissolves, right? Yeah. So the goal is that they really value each other. So we call it the hive. They work with each other, and that, and it's also just amazing to see how my kids have grown up and seen what makes a company a company.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's so much more than like your profit and loss statements and you know who's right. It's so much more than that. It's like, these are like the people that you are getting up out of bed for every day.
Yeah.
Then you're breaking bread in your house, which means it's different than going to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Like, it just is. Like you're inviting them into your home. That's very personal.
Much more intimate. Yeah.
Yeah, much more intimate. Mm-hmm. I want to segue off that because I think it's relevant. So I know you've acquired some offices, and it's kind of a segue from culture, but not only like, how did you do that? Did you raise capital? Like, what was the process in doing that? Because I think that's a really interesting conversation. And then second part, culture, how do you blend them?
Ooh, that could be like a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this, I did not raise capital.
Okay.
I think that most mergers and acquisitions happen over a course of just years of relationships, like, right? Because these were people, these were colleagues in the industry. They were competitors, but we worked together. We collaborated together. When things went south, we picked up the phone. There was a relationship there where we had to compete, and there were things they got and things I got over the course of doing business together.
Sure.
But there was always a huge amount of respect on both sides. And I think one day we just kind of came together. That was the opportunity. Everyone was when Compass came in, right? Because Compass came in, like, you just had to name it. It was a change in history. Like, if there's real estate history, they were a game changer. They came in and they
bought everybody.
They were writing some checks.
It was like it was the annihilation of like the Native Americans, right? I mean, it was like the tribes are gone.
It's
and
extreme, but
it's an extreme. It was an extreme time. That's what it felt like to me.
Sure.
Yeah. No, we appreciate you giving us our soundbite for the promotion of the pod. That was great. Compass came in. Never mind. Keep going.
But it's not even a dig at them, but it took all these little companies and just annihilated them.
Totally.
It did.
So there was like the last of like these groups that got together that were like, hey, we kind of have a way of doing things that maybe we were still in our tribes, and you were Sioux and I was, the Banshee, and we kind of competed against each other. But there's a certain time now where we're at least coming from the same field. And so those opportunities opened up.
Did they all just approach you and you were just like, oh yeah, I guess that's a good idea? Right. No, of course. So you had some thoughtful.
I have been on a million dates. I mean, let's just say, if this wasn't real estate, I'd be labeled a couple of things. I will talk to anybody, because I never know where my next relationship will be. And I don't know if I'll be the acquirer or the acquired. Like, you don't know. I'm never going to be like, oh, never. No.
Yeah.
So, with Marvin Gardens, it was a good synergy. We tried a couple of years ago. It wasn't the right time. And then it became the right time. Yeah. There are always those conversations. I mean, there are people out there that I know I'm not doing business with now, but given the opportunity and the right timing, we'll do business together.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever way it looks like.
You'd like to, right? Yeah.
So there's that opportunity. I will say this, though, the idea that you need to bring in all this capital, or that you need backing, or all you need is everything you've ever had when you ran your business anyway. It's just like some creative, you've got that ideology, you've got those same values. Anything can be put together. Like, that's the wonderful part of being an independent. I don't have bylaws, this book, of what I can and cannot do, and whose territory I'm in, and what, I crossed over, and who owns that, and who's the political, like, it's just, I'm an independent. So I'm headquarters, I say. I'm like, well, if it's, mostly legal and ethical and let's go for it.
Well,
so wait, I got a question first. I'm sorry, because there's a through line here that you mentioned multiple times about people and the human involved in the process before the business of the business process. Where does that come from for you? Where do you think is the origin of that? Because it seems thematic in everything you've discussed so far.
Oh, Well, look at that. I think I remember almost every escrow of how I was treated on the other side. It didn't matter what went down, but how that person picked up the phone and how they handled things was, even if it got into high conflict, if there was a level of respect or there wasn't, you just kind of remember those things. And that relationship, I mean, we're on opposite ends of the table constantly, but that doesn't mean that there's not this collaboration or this respect. And let me tell you, I've been treated disrespectfully plenty of times. And there's been plenty of times that I've been treated with the utmost respect from people that, didn't have to, but that's just who they were in their character.
Yeah.
Those things come around.
Yeah.
They come back around, right? Yeah. So, how you treated anyone, how you break up with someone, how you leave a company, how you maneuver, how people leave the company they're at to come to me. And, we watch that, right? You could be like, uh-oh, I see how this is going to end in 6 months to 2 years with this person because I just saw how they showed up.
Right.
So yeah, I think I'm also just, I never made decisions purely out of again, bottom line data. I look at that. I'm a numbers girl, but I really have looked at what is the legacy of this person's character within this market dynamic for years. And that is always probably how I've made decisions around. I haven't done that many acquisitions, but I'm only 21 years in. It's I think that's really where it comes from. Is are you guys relatable? Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's what breaks up marriages too, right? It's it's usually not the finances or that piece. It's usually just something about the day-to-day, how you treat people and the overall.
The way you load the dishwasher has ended a lot of relationships. Not really. That's true,
but right? Maybe. They say it's either a raccoon on crack or a Danish engineer.
Yes. I am the Danish engineer in my relationship.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of the raccoon on crack.
Well, that's all right. So, world needs both kinds. Yeah,
they do. So let me ask you this, because you've been involved in a lot of different aspects of the industry. You've been involved with NAR. You've been involved in Women Up. You've been involved in so many aspects to make the industry better, which is awesome. And this Keith and I were talking about this because we were watching a stat. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things going on at NAR right now, and we'll address some of those, especially around the lawsuits. But the stat we were looking at, which we just found, we're just totally confused by it still as well. 60% of all realtors are women, but 60% don't represent the CEOs of this industry. And what needs to change?
Women.
That's a pretty direct question, but
what
was your answer? I'm gonna say, and it's going to be here's going to be my angry email. I don't think the men are going to change because frankly, why would you? Who's going to be you know what? Let me give up some more of my market share. Let me give up 9 of my seats and make sure that you're it's almost like a spiritually religious answer to say to somebody, I need you to change and give away some of your power, because most people won't. I think women need to step into those roles, and they're not going to be invited. They're not going to be asked. I always say this in society. We have trained our men to ask for everything, including their first date, their prom date, everything. They get all those years of experience of asking for what they want and getting all the rejection and just learning to be fine with it. We, on the other side, have had to take the role of well, wait for it or don't ask for it. Now that narrative is totally changing, but I think until it changes, it's not just real estate. A lot of industries are populated by women. They're just not populated in the leadership roles by women. And I think one of the other reasons of that is when I use a dominant trait, I'm often told that that's a male trait. It's not a male or a female. You can't put a gender on a response.
Right.
They are inherently genderless. But you get put into these typecasting of roles of wow, she's aggressive or assertive or something that would be a male trait. Well, call it what you want. But when you can actually embrace, I think, that duality of who you are as a human, you're going to be way more comfortable having to use responses that may be not of your gender, right? Not gender specific. I've got to go into a place where it's going to be uncomfortable. It's great for me to nurture and to invite people over for dinner. Like, that's a very female thing to do. But what about when I have to negotiate a really complex transaction? What about when I have somebody who's like a CEO of a massive firm that wants to go head to head with me on finances? Like, am I going to be equally as comfortable there as I am serving chicken? Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is, yes, I am. And I think a lot of women are, but they don't necessarily know that. And they're just comfortable. Like they talk themselves into like, well, I've got children, or I've got a spouse, or that. There's a million ways as to say why you shouldn't do it. But until the women truly, make the space at the table, sit in the seat, walk into the room and step into that, no one's going to lead them there. So I hate, like, I don't want to say like it's women's fault. It's not women's fault, but it is their opportunity.
Right. Well, I asked the question, and it's obviously in this polarizing country, things can go in all different directions. But I think Keith and I wanted to ask it because there needs to be more of you, and you're awesome at what you do. And I think the more that we can, figure out a way to create more of those opportunities, I think is a really good thing for our business and our society and everything else. So, we appreciate that. It was a really, I love how just direct you are about this stuff and your approach on it.
I could see this. You could invite more women to opportunity. Like, you could get them exposure, because sometimes I think with women, when they take their baby steps in it, they get the exposure and they start to feel more empowered, and that does lead them, right? It leads them down a path. I mean, I got to say, it's because it's funny, right? Like, Keith was the one that I never went to Keith and said I want a leadership role. That's so true. You did do that, right? 100%. Like, he's been doing that for a really long time.
No, and we do this still today, to be clear. Like, I mean, it's our a majority of our corporate team is actually women, and it's not based on gender. It's based upon qualification, but also you can see somebody and go, this person's going to do amazing things. As Keith, tap them on the shoulder and say, you should be doing more. Like, this is where you should be in a role. So.
The biggest problem in any business that I've ever been involved with is the talent gap, right? Mm-hmm. So it never, I don't know, maybe it's because my mom is sort of she's been the biggest influence on my life professionally, right? C-level executive in healthcare and that sort of stuff. So it never occurred to me to think of, like, I'm just looking for the single best person
100%
I can find. Yeah. Because if I can get 3 to 5 of the best human beings possible, my life changes in amazing ways, right? As a leader, it candidly, don't tell anybody, it gets way easier. My life gets way easier the more talent that I surround myself with.
100%.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest challenge facing our industry today? Is it AI? Is it lawsuits? We'll talk about that in a minute, like lax licensing laws, legislative stuff. What's your take right now? You've been doing this a long time, so.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been the same. It's been the same problem. I mean, AI is lax. I mean, the lax licensing laws have been there since forever, so that's probably not going to change. I think we can't get out of our own way. A lot of times as leaders, I mean, I really find that, holding the line. We've got an interesting product. We don't have employees. We basically work for them. And if you realize like that, they're the customer, and your job is to make yourself almost like indispensable into the eyes of your customer, then I think that you move with a little bit more confidence. I think we have a very, our leaders in this industry at the very, very topmost levels suffer from severe lack of confidence. And if they had more of it, they would hold that line, and this industry would be far superior, I think, than it probably is. And not everyone gunning to find the angle to take it down, right? I mean, I feel like we are constantly fighting that exterior of like consumers and laws and, this DOJ thing. Like, it's been so hard. Like, we're really always the underdog. And there's a reason there's that. It's because there's a lot of really kind of lame people in our industry. And they're not bad inherently. There's something, they're just, they don't, there's a lack of value.
Scarcity mindset versus abundancy mindset.
Yeah, there's a lot of us, right? So there's just a lot of us. So there's this, I don't know.
So the biggest threat is actually ourselves, in essence.
Yeah.
Really, which is hysterical, right? Like, because there you are.
Well, at least it's easier to solve, maybe. Well, maybe not, right?
I don't know. I think it's the hardest thing to solve because you have to, in changing the industry, you might have to remove yourself from it.
Yeah. Wait, are you saying I'm the problem?
Yeah, I don't
She's
know.
looking directly at you, by the way, Keith, when she said that.
I did look at Keith.
Well, I mean, it's almost like association and MLSs. I mean, it's like we all know they need to consolidate, but nobody wants to give up their job. I get why, but like,
but there's a thread that I want to pull on a little there because some of it I think has to do with the perception of this managing or leading independent contractors, right? And we think that means we always have to do whatever they want sometimes in this industry. But they really, truly, like most people, want to be led. And being led sometimes means telling you no, right? But that seems to very often be resisted in this industry. Like, I don't want to tell my agents no. I don't want to deliver bad news to my agents. But strong leaders will, right? You'll come in, you're like, here's a reality of where we are in time and space. This is the direction that we have to go. I love you enough to tell you the truth. And I'm heading this way. I hope you come with me. Right now, you can't do that all day, every day on every topic, but on the big important ones, if you make enough of those emotional deposits, enough of those full moon-ish dinners and all of the things that matter, then you've earned the right to make an emotional withdrawal and say, this is the direction that the company is headed. And I sure hope you follow me.
Totally. Or the market is headed, or the consumer demand is headed, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. But I think so often they just are in the full moonish dinner phase, which is very important, but they don't have the confidence, to your point, to then say, this is the direction because of the industry or because of the lawsuits or because of whatever.
And then I would say, like, don't lead. You could still have a role within this, but don't be responsible for taking 200 or 300 or 500 or 700 people with you on a bad journey. Like, there are some people that just shouldn't lead. Yeah. Right. And like, you only really need 1 to 500. I mean, the ratio is not like, and I'm not saying it in even an arrogant way, but there's going to be a time where I have to willingly and, hang up my hat, right? Because my time for leading has ended.
You're right. Yeah.
Let me ask you one question, then Keith will wrap us up with his favorite question at the back. Are you preparing your people? Because we're talking about leadership. So are you preparing your people for the lawsuits? Like, what is your take on that right now? I'm just curious.
So I don't prepare them. We don't talk about it in the context of lawsuits, right? What we talk about it is in the context of agency. And now it's how are you delivering and articulating your value to buyers and getting comfortable with eventually signing a contract. It's not, first we've got to get them trained on really articulating that piece. And getting really, really confident in what they're doing and how they're representing buyers. And we're doing a lot more of that. But we've done that pretty much all through time anyway. We've done it on the list side forever. Right. Now we're just changing the narrative. We're changing even how we talk to consumers from a buy side narrative as we get ready. But the contracts are not yet needed. So you don't want to throw that in at this moment because it actually could hinder their ability to get in the Bay Area.
You're baby stepping it, but you're preparing.
But it's really just like you are going to serve. And, we've already served 60% buy side anyway. So it's articulating that value. I think my feeling is the language that we're using right now is the game is certainly not over when, if and when this happens and it switches to writing a contract where you have to negotiate
a buyer broker agreement or whatever.
What I actually think is going to be interesting is those that are, I look at my list side and I won't go into anything that violates any topics around compensation, but it's interesting to see, I have agents that may charge a higher amount than what would be considered the industry standard, but they're damn well worth it. And their consumers agree as well. So it's interesting to see once we're negotiating the buy side, will that come through and will you start to see stronger brokerages and stronger agents based on that disruption?
It's a really interesting comment, and then I'll shut up because I know Keith wants to finish this out. There was a comment a guy made to me once. He goes, I can't wait for the day. This is from somebody else, by the way. I agree with it, that I don't have the listing agent telling me what my compensation is when representing a buyer.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
That was just a really interesting comment. He's like, I would rather be able to talk to the buyer and dictate what I want to be compensated and be in charge of that discussion. I was like, that's that right there. There's something right there in that topic. So
So here's what's interesting too, just quick narrative on that is when I was talking about like, well, what makes Red Oak Red Oak? The fact that people show up every week to learn more, that the fact that they are not so egotistical or arrogant that they've been in it for 30 years and are like, I still have more to learn. It's that mindset that's going to be okay with that decision, whatever it may be. And that's how, like, I prepared for this 25 years ago by having a culture that showed up every day saying, I want to learn more. I just tell me what I need to know and let's figuring it out together. And so I feel like I'm not like, yay, I can't wait, but I'm like, all right, it's going to happen and I'll be ready.
Yeah. The two soft skills, or maybe they're not soft skills really, but the two skill sets that I think everyone who is listening to this should be working on tomorrow are differentiation and providing value to the buy side of the experience, right? So be thinking about that, be talking about that. And then negotiation, right? Like, we're not used to negotiating. In general, as an industry, we're not great. We're brilliant humanists, but we're not maybe the best negotiators. So those two skill sets are going to be at the front. The people that are better at that or get better at that will get their unfair share on the other side of these potential changes that are coming.
Just be open to getting better at that.
Yeah.
You don't have to turn out. Just
start. Just 1% better, right? You go 1% better. Okay. This is what we always end with. Are you ready?
Oh, yes.
If you were are you a licensed real estate agent still? Well,
yes.
Yeah. Do you transact?
Nope.
Oh, okay. So if you were a transacting real estate agent today, what is the one thing you would add or do to your business to make the biggest impact for between now and the end of the year?
Oh my God.
You know, it's a good question when they got to think about it.
I know. Well, I would say I really am starting to get I know it's so old video, but like really just, I still think video is really, really incredibly important as I see next generation where they're going with it.
Yeah.
So I do believe that it's that, but I gotta say, there is nothing better than learning how to negotiate. Nothing better. I don't know if you guys knew, but I during COVID, I was getting bored just working and drinking high-end wine. So because every week,
no one ever.
I could die next week. Remember those early days? You're like,
I remember those days.
7 days to live. Drink the good wine.
I still use that excuse every day to drink high-end wine.
My garage looked a lot like a liquor store.
Exactly, right? So I went back and I enrolled and I went and got my master's in law, and I just wrapped it up in May.
Oh, congrats!
And,
congratulations!
It was. I did it sort of impulsively, and then I was like, oh God, now I have like law books to read every single week while running a company. It was a lot, but it's amazing when you really start like writing again and you're reading law and you're getting deep into contract and you're getting deep into like 21 years in this business. And I can't tell you how much I took away, and like, it has served me so much more just taking it to that next level.
Yeah.
So there is a differentiator in those that are, it's not that you know how to do it, it's that you're just so comfortable with it.
Right.
That like, you don't even, like, it's just like, oh, I got to get on the phone and do this thing.
Let's go do this.
And it's just this comfort level, and it's so disarming. And then it creates this whole dialogue that is, and it's just a very powerful thing. So I truly believe, like, I'm not saying go back to law school for it, but what my point is if you get super comfortable in that, the world's your oyster for almost everything you do in life. As soon as you walk out your door, like, as you tuck your kid into bed and it comes into, right? Like, so I just think that's the key thing is if you're in business and you're in a high level business like this, where it's high end, collateral being exchanged, know your shit. And the first thing is to like, know that when you do and don't and how you're going to negotiate around it. That's my biggest takeaway.
Good one.
I love it. I love it. Vanessa, thanks for being on. It was awesome. We always love hearing your wisdom, and just your leadership skill is great and refreshing. So congrats on all the success too.
Yeah.
So, thank you for having me, guys. It was good to see you.
Of course.
To see you.
Listen, we care about you deeply, which is why we never want you to miss an episode of this podcast. Subscribe now. It's just a push of a button.